Hello, myself Gautam from group 316. Today my topic is transport of charged particles through membrane. Transport of charged particles such as ions across the cell membrane is essential for various biological processes including cell signaling, nutrient uptake and waste removal. This process is carefully regulated by the cell membrane which is selectively permeable due to its lipid bilayer structure. Charged particles cannot easily pass through the hydrophobic lipid layer, so they require specific transport mechanisms. This movement of change particles often relies on both passive and active mechanisms. Here's an overview of the how this occurs. First one is passive transport mechanism. In this, the passive transport lies on the concentration gradient and doesn't require energy. Types of passive transport for charged particles include ion channels and facilitated diffusion. So first one is ion channels. These are the protein structures that form pores in the membrane, allowing specific ions, sodium, potassium, calcium, chlorine, to move down their concentration gradient. Ion channels are often gated, meaning they can open or close in response to signals. Example: voltage changes, ligand bending. So second one is facilitated diffusion. In this involves carrier proteins that bind to the specific ions or charged molecules, undergo a conformational change and move them across the membrane without the need for ATP. Although this process is passive and it is selective for certain ions. Second one is active transport mechanisms. Active transport requires energy, often in the form of ATP, to move ions against their concentration gradient. This process is essential for maintaining concentration gradients across the membrane. Types of active transport includes two types: primary active transport and secondary active transport. Secondary active transport, also known as co-transport. So first one is primary active transport. It directly uses ATP to transport ions. The sodium potassium pump is a classic example which actively pumps sodium and potassium into the cell, maintaining crucial ionic gradients for cell function. Second one is secondary active transport. It uses the energy from an established concentration gradient of one ion to drive the transport of another. For example, the sodium glucose co-transporter uses the sodium gradient to bring glucose into the cell against its concentration gradient. Third one is electrochemical gradient and membrane potential. It's two types: electrochemical gradient and membrane potential. Electrochemical gradient. It is the transport of ions is influenced by the both concentration gradients and electrical gradients. Cell maintains a difference in change across the membranes, with the inside of the cell typically more negative than the outside. This creates an electrochemical gradient driving ions to move in ways that balance both charge and concentration. Membrane potential. This voltage difference across the membrane is crucial for many cellular functions. For example, in neurons, rapid changes in membrane potential allow for the transmission of nerve impulses. The membrane potential is established primarily by the distribution of potassium and sodium ions and is essential for processes like action potential generation in neurons. Fourth one is endocytosis and exocytosis. Although primarily used for larger particles, cells can transport charged macromolecules or particles in bulk through vesicle formation. It's two types: endocytosis and exocytosis. Endocytosis, the cell membrane engulfs particles, forming vesicles to bring them into the cell. And in exocytosis, the cell expels particles by fusing vesicles with the membrane to release their contents outside. Fifth one is vesicular transport. In some cases, charged particles may be transported in bulk via vesicles in processes like endocytosis and exocytosis. Although not directly transporting individual ions, this process also allows for the movement of larger quantities of charged particles. Sixth one is role of ion channels and transporters. Ion channels and transporters embedded in the membrane have specific roles in regulating ion concentration and maintaining homeostasis. There are two types: ion channels and ion pumps and transporters. Ion channels permits passive flow of specific ions and may be highly selective based on ion size, charge, and hydration cell. They can respond to stimuli, voltage, ligand binding that triggers opening or closing. Ion pump and transporter. It actively transport ions to maintain gradient essential for cell survival. The sodium potassium pump for instance, is vital for maintaining osmotic balance and cell volume. Seventh one is examples in cellular process. There are three examples: nerve impulse transmission, muscle contraction, and pH regulation. Nerve impulse transmission: in this, ion channels play a crucial role in the propagation of action potential in neurons, where the opening and closing of sodium and potassium channels create rapid changes in membrane potential. In muscle contraction, calcium ions are transported into and out of the muscle cells, triggering the concentration and contraction and relaxation of cycle. pH regulation: proton pumps in the cell membrane transport H plus ions to regulate the pH within cellular compartments such as lysozymes. Eighth one is examples in biological system. First one is nervous system. Nervous system in neurons rely on the rapid movement of the sodium and calcium ions to propagate action potentials, allowing for the transmission of signal through the body. Muscle cells. Calcium ions released from the internal stores triggers muscle contraction. In mitochondria, proton gradient across the mitochondrial membrane drives the ATP synthesis and cells energy currency through a process called chemiosmosis. Fourth one is kidneys. In it is specialized ion transport systems help regulate blood pH and electrolyte balance by managing ion concentration. Ninth one is significance in medicine and technology. Understanding ion transport is crucial in medicine, and dysfunction in this process is linked to the disease like cystic fibrosis, cardiac arrhythmias, and hypertension. Additionally, ion channels and pumps are targeted by various drugs to manage these conditions. In this technology, knowledge is applied in developing biosensors, drug delivery systems, and synthetic membranes for filtration and separation process. Tenth one is importance in health and disease. Proper ion transport is critical and crucial for physiological functions. Malfunctions in ion channels or transports can lead to conditions like cystic fibrosis, hypertension, and cardiac arrhythmias. This mechanism allows cells to maintain an optimal internal environment, communicate with each other, and respond to changes in their external surroundings. Thank you.